One night in 1977, a deeply depressed young man in London woke up at 3 in the morning with a single thought looping in his head. I cannot live with myself any longer. And then he caught the strangeness of the sentence. If I cannot live with myself, who is the I and who is the self? In the space that opened between those two, his entire suffering identity collapsed. And what was left was a stillness so complete, he spent the next 2 years on park benches in a state of bliss. 20 years later, Eckhart Tolle put what he learned in that stillness into the book you're about to hear, summarized chapter by chapter. Chapter 1, You Are Not Your Mind. The book opens with a small parable. A beggar had been sitting by the side of a road for over 30 years, holding out an old baseball cap and asking passers-by for spare change. One day a stranger stopped in front of him and said, I have nothing to give you, but what is that thing you are sitting on? The beggar said it was nothing, just an old box he had been sitting on for as long as he could remember. The stranger asked him to look inside. The beggar pried open the lid and discovered the box was filled with gold. Tolle says he is that stranger, and most of us are that beggar. We sit on a treasure of inner stillness our whole lives and never once look inside, because we are so busy looking outside for scraps of pleasure, validation, and security that we never realize the wealth was always under us. He tells the parable not as a poetic flourish, but as a literal description of the human condition he is about to spend the rest of the book unpacking. The reason we never look inside, he argues, is that we are completely identified with the voice in our head. There is a near-constant stream of inner commentary running every minute we are awake, judging, planning, complaining, rehearsing, worrying, and remembering. And most people mistake that voice for who they are. They think they are the thinker. Tolle says this is the single greatest obstacle to a peaceful life. You are not the voice. You are the awareness that hears the voice. He pushes this further. The voice is not even objective. It distorts, it exaggerates, it tells the same story in 20 different ways. It argues with people who are not in the room. It stages scenes that will never happen. Yet most of us treat it as the truth, and we feel its commentary as our actual reality. The anxiety it generates feels like a real threat, not like a thought about a possible threat. The shame it generates feels like an accurate verdict on who we are, not like one possible interpretation among many. The first practice in the book is the simplest one. Start to listen to your own mind the way you would eavesdrop on a stranger on a bus. Do not agree with the voice. Do not argue with it. Do not analyze it. Just notice it is talking. The moment you do that, a second thing has shown up that was always there, but was hidden behind the noise. Tolle calls it the witnessing presence. It is the part of you that can watch a thought arise and pass without being pulled into it. This is the move the whole book turns on. The thinker and the witness are not the same thing. The thinker generates the noise. The witness hears the noise. As long as you only know the thinker, you live inside whatever story it is telling you. The moment you find the witness, even for a second, the spell breaks, because now there is a piece of you that is not inside the story. There is a useful line near the end of the chapter. The mind by itself is not the problem. It is a brilliant tool. The problem begins when you mistake the tool for the user, when you let it run constantly and call its chatter your identity. The mind is for solving problems, not for telling you who you are. The takeaway is small, but the consequences are huge. Every spiritual move in the rest of the book depends on this one shift. The recognition that there is something in you deeper and quieter than the voice you have been listening to your whole life. Find that something even briefly, even imperfectly, and the rest of Tolle's teaching has a place to land. Chapter 2. Consciousness, the Way Out of Pain. Tolle now introduces the concept the book is most famous for, the pain body. Every emotional wound a person has ever taken in and not fully felt and released leaves a residue. Over a lifetime, those residues fuse into what he describes as a semi-autonomous energy field that lives inside us. It is not a metaphor for him. It is a real felt presence that has its own pull and its own appetite. The pain body, he says, is hungry. It feeds on negative thinking and on conflict. It loves resentment, guilt, jealousy, drama, and any argument that lets it grow. When it is active, it actually wants you to suffer, because suffering is its food. Tolle puts it this way: pain can only feed on pain, and pain cannot feed on joy, because joy is indigestible to it. The pain body has no interest in your healing because your healing would mean its end. He notes that the pain body has cycles. It can lie dormant for weeks and then surface, often triggered by something small, a tone of voice, a song on the radio, a smell that touches a memory. For many women, it tends to stir more strongly in the days before the menstrual cycle, which Tolle reframes as a recurring opportunity rather than a problem, because the pain that surfaces is already partly outside its hiding place and can be met directly. For everyone, it shows up in arguments with a partner, in family visits, in the late-night spiral of an old memory, in the disproportionate rage at a stranger who cuts in line. There is a tell that lets you spot the pain body in action. When you are reacting far more strongly than the present situation warrants, when an irritation flares into fury, when a small disappointment opens a trapdoor into despair, you are not actually reacting to the present. You are reacting to the present plus every old pain it just touched, all of which surfaced in a single rush and got attached to the wrong target. Most people deal with the pain body in one of two ways. They suppress it, swallowing the feeling and pretending it is not there, which feeds it in the dark and lets it grow without being seen. Or they act it out, pouring the pain into shouting matches, sulking, drinking, or aggression, which also feeds it because the drama is exactly what it wants. Both responses are forms of identification. The person becomes the pain instead of meeting the pain. There is only one move that actually dissolves it, and it is the same move from Chapter 1. You observe it. When you feel the pain body rising, you turn your attention to it directly. You feel the heaviness in your chest or the heat in your face, and you stay there without thinking about it. You do not narrate it. You do not justify it. You do not look for the person to blame. You just feel. The feeling and the awareness of the feeling cannot share the same space for long. Consciousness and unconscious pain are not compatible, Tolle says. And the moment you bring full presence to the pain body, it begins to lose its power. The thoughts feeding it stop. The energy starts to settle. What looked like a personal demon turns out to be just stored emotion, waiting for someone to finally pay attention to it. Each time you do this, a piece of the pain body is dissolved and does not come back. Tolle adds an important caution. The pain body is clever, and one of its favorite tricks is to use spiritual language against itself. It can convince you that you are observing it when you are actually identifying with it, generating a long inner narrative about your suffering that feels insightful, but is really just the pain body talking in a more sophisticated voice. The test for whether real observation is happening is simple. Real observation is silent. It does not have a story. The moment a story starts up, the witnessing has slipped back into thinking, and the pain body is feeding again. The work is to drop the story and return to the raw felt sense of what is in the body without commentary. He also addresses what happens when you live with another person who has an active pain body of their own. Their pain body will try to provoke yours, because two pain bodies feed each other. The strongest possible response is not to argue back, which gives it food, but to be so present yourself that there is nothing in you for the other person's pain body to grab onto. Your presence becomes a kind of refusal to dance with their suffering, and over time, in the best cases, it can begin to dissolve theirs too. The takeaway: the things in your past that still hurt are still hurting because no one, including you, has ever fully sat with them. Awareness is the dissolver, and you are the awareness. Chapter 3 takes aim at the mind's addiction to time. Tolle makes a careful distinction here that matters for the rest of the book. There is clock time, and there is psychological time, and they are completely different things. Clock time is useful. It is appointments, schedules, learning from a past mistake, planning a trip, remembering where you parked the car. The mind handles clock time well, and Tolle has no quarrel with it. Psychological time is the problem. Psychological time is the mind's habit of constantly leaving the present moment to live in regret, resentment, anticipation, anxiety, or fantasy. It is dwelling on a 5-year-old conversation. It is rehearsing tomorrow's meeting at midnight. It is replaying a breakup from a decade ago as if it were happening right now. He gives a clean diagnostic line that is worth memorizing. Unease, anxiety, tension, stress, and worry, all the forms of fear, are caused by too much future and not enough presence. Guilt, regret, resentment, grievances, sadness, bitterness, and all the forms of non-forgiveness are caused by too much past and not enough presence. If you take any uncomfortable emotion you have right now and look at it honestly, it is almost certainly pointing at a past you are still carrying or a future you have not yet met. The present moment, the one you are actually inside of, almost never contains the suffering. The suffering is the time traveling. He gives a concrete example with mistakes. If you made a mistake yesterday and today you look at it, see what you can learn, and apply the lesson, you are using clock time well. That is healthy. If you take the same mistake and dwell on it with self-criticism, shame, and a story about what kind of person you are for having made it, you have moved from clock time into psychological time. You have made the mistake part of your identity, and now you are stuck. The mistake stops being something you did and becomes something you are. The same logic applies to the future. There is a useful difference between planning, which the mind does in service of an actual outcome, and worrying, which is the mind staging disaster movies on a loop. Planning ends when the plan is made. Worrying never ends because it is not trying to solve anything. It is trying to control a future that has not arrived and never will arrive in the form the mind is rehearsing. Tolle points out a strange feature of the present moment. You have never not been in it. Every memory you have was experienced in its original moment as a present moment. Every future you fear will arrive, if it arrives at all, as a present moment. There has never been a time in your life when it was not now. Yet the mind has convinced you that life happened somewhere else. In the past you are dragging behind you, or the future you are racing toward, and that the present is just the thin slice in between that you have to get through to reach the real action. The practice for this chapter is to start noticing how often the mind leaves the present moment and where it tends to go. Just notice. Most people are shocked by how rarely they are actually here. You sit down to eat dinner, and the next thing you know, you're halfway through the plate, and the only thing you have tasted is the conversation in your own head. Tolle pushes a little further on identity. Most people derive their sense of who they are almost entirely from psychological time. They are the sum of their memories, the story of where they have been plus their projections of who they will become. When the past and the future are taken away, even briefly, the question of who you are gets unsettling because there is nothing of the usual self left to identify with. That unsettling feeling is exactly the doorway. The self that needed the time story to exist is not the deepest self. The awareness that remains when the time story stops is what was always underneath it. The takeaway is that the present moment is the only place anything real ever happens, and the mind has spent your whole life convincing you that the real action is somewhere else. It is not. It is right here. It always has been. If the present moment is so available, why do we avoid it so consistently? Because the mind has a long catalog of strategies for keeping us out of it, and Chapter 4 lays them out one by one. The most common strategy is resistance, which Tolle defines simply as the internal sentence, "This should not be happening." Every time you complain, every time you feel resentment, even subtle irritation at traffic or weather or someone's tone of voice, you are running that sentence under your breath. Resistance does not change the situation. It only adds suffering on top of it. Two layers now exist where one was before. The situation itself, which may or may not be hard, and your fight with the fact of the situation, which is always painful and which never accomplishes anything. Another strategy is waiting. The mind tells you that you will be happy when. You will be happy when the weekend comes, when the promotion lands, when the right partner shows up, when the kids are out of the house, when you have a little more money, When you finally get to the place that has finally arranged itself the way you wanted it to. Each of these promises pulls life into a future that never arrives because the moment the condition is met, the mind moves the line. You get the promotion. The mind invents a new condition. You get the relationship. The mind invents a new condition. Tolle calls waiting the most pervasive form of psychological avoidance because it looks productive and it looks reasonable, but it consumes the only life you have, which is the one happening right now. A third strategy is what Tolle calls ordinary unconsciousness, a low-grade unease that hangs over most people most of the time. It is not depression in the clinical sense. It is just a constant background hum of dissatisfaction with what is. It is the slight tightness in the chest, the slight irritation at being interrupted, the slight impatience with how slow the line is moving. Most people accept it as normal because they have never lived without it. They were born into the hum, and they assume the hum is what being alive sounds like. It is not. It is the sound of resistance to the present, kept low enough that it never quite registers as a problem. The mind has subtler tricks, too. It seeks out grievance because a grievance gives the ego a stable identity built on opposition. It seeks out problems to solve because solving problems is what makes it feel important. It even seeks out spiritual seeking, which can become its own avoidance strategy. The endless reading of books, the endless trying of techniques, the endless arrival at insight that never quite lands, all of which keeps the actual work permanently in the future. The way out is not to fix the circumstance the mind is complaining about, because there will always be a new circumstance. The way out is to catch the resistance itself in the act and bring awareness to it. The complaint stops being something true about the world and becomes something interesting to observe. The waiting stops being a strategy that almost worked and becomes a habit you can see clearly. Tolle adds one more strategy that is harder to spot, what he calls problem-making. The mind likes problems because problems give it something to do and a reason to keep running. So even when life is, by any honest measure, going fine, the mind will pick something to worry about, something to obsess over, something to elevate into a crisis, just to keep the engine going. Most people have a kind of background problem they cycle through almost continuously, swapping it out for a new one when the old one resolves. The work is to notice that the problem is being generated by the mind that wants a problem, not by the situation itself. The takeaway from this chapter is sharp. Whenever you notice you're unhappy in the present, ask yourself one question. What is actually wrong with this moment? Not with what just happened or what might happen next, but with this exact moment right now. The honest answer almost always is nothing. Your breath is fine. Your body is upright. The room is the temperature it is. The suffering was a story the mind was telling about the moment, not the moment itself. And the moment you can see that, the story loses most of its grip. Chapter 5 tries to describe what presence actually feels like, which is harder than it sounds, because the moment you describe it, you are using the very thinking mind it transcends. Tolle says the easiest way in is through a quality of alert, intense attention. He gives the most famous instruction in this chapter. Be like a cat watching a mouse hole. What thought is going to come out of the mouse hole? If you hold your attention on the gap between thoughts with that level of intensity, thoughts cannot easily arise because thinking requires inattention to do its work. You are still, you are highly alert, and you are not thinking. That state is presence. He uses another analogy that lands more easily for some people. There is the bored, mind-wandering kind of waiting we all know, the kind you do in line while replaying yesterday in your head. And there is a different kind of waiting, a heightened alertness, in which something could happen at any moment, and if you are not absolutely awake, you will miss it. All your attention is in the now. There is no daydreaming, no anticipating, no fear, just a clean alertness. That, Tolle says, is what presence feels like, and it is available to you in any moment. He addresses a confusion many readers fall into. Presence is not a blank, vacant state. It is the opposite. It is sharper than ordinary consciousness, more vivid, more aware. People who try meditation and complain of feeling spaced out have usually slipped into a dull mental drift, not presence. Presence is wide awake. Colors look more saturated in it. Sounds become more distinct. The body becomes more felt. The world stops being a backdrop to your thoughts and starts being something you are actually meeting. The practice he gives is to drop in for short stretches throughout the day. Stop whatever you are doing and become intensely aware of your breath, of the sounds in the room, of the weight of your body in the chair. Do not analyze it. Just notice it. Those moments of full presence, repeated many times in a day, slowly change the default setting of your attention. Eventually, presence starts to be the background and thinking becomes a tool you pick up, instead of presence being the rare exception and thinking being the unbroken default. Tolle warns that the mind will fight this. The mind has been in charge for decades, and it does not give up easily. It will tell you that presence is boring, that you are wasting time, that there are real problems to think about, that this is all very nice, but you need to get back to the planning. None of that is the mind being wrong exactly. It is the mind doing what minds do, which is to keep generating thought. The work is not to silence the mind permanently. The work is to stop being the mind so completely. Let it run in the background like a radio in another room, and put your attention on the room you are actually in. The chapter clears up one more thing. You have probably tasted presence many times in your life without naming it. The moment of awe, standing in front of something beautiful in nature. The strange calm that comes in a sudden crisis when everything slows down. The first second of a deep kiss before the mind starts commenting on the kiss. The hush after a piece of music ends. Those were not unusual or mystical. Those were the normal state of consciousness underneath the noise, showing through for a moment. The chapter teaches you to find that quality on purpose instead of having to wait for life to deliver it by accident. Up to this point, the book has been mostly conceptual, but in Chapter 6, Tolle moves into the body, which he calls the most direct doorway into presence the average person has access to. He distinguishes between the outer body, the one you see in the mirror, and what he calls the inner body, which is the felt sense of life energy moving through you from the inside. Most people have lost contact with the inner body because they live almost entirely in their heads, treating the body as a vehicle that carries the head from one meeting to the next. The body has become an object to be groomed, judged, optimized, and occasionally fed, but rarely felt. The exercise from this chapter is one of the most quoted in the whole book, and it takes about 30 seconds to try. Close your eyes, drop your attention into your hands without moving them and without looking at them. Ask yourself how you know your hands are even there. If you stay with the question for a few seconds, you will start to feel a faint tingling, a warmth, a kind of buzz inside the palms and fingers. That subtle aliveness is the inner body. It was always there. You just were not paying attention to it. Once you can feel it in the hands, extend the same attention to the feet, then the legs, then the chest, then the whole body, all at once. Tolle says this practice has two big benefits. First, the inner body is always in the present moment because the body cannot be anywhere else. You cannot feel your hands 10 minutes from now. You can only feel them now. So, tuning into the inner body is a back door into presence that bypasses the thinking mind entirely. You did not have to argue with a thought or remember a teaching. You just dropped your attention into your hands, and there you were. Second, the inner body is where stored emotional pain lives, including the pain body from Chapter 2. The more you live with awareness in the body, the more old pain slowly dissolves on its own, without you having to think about it or talk about it. The pain body is, in a sense, a body phenomenon as much as a mind one. It is held in the chest, in the throat, in the gut, in the jaw. When you bring presence into the body, you bring presence into the place where the old pain is living, and presence is the one thing that dissolves it. He recommends taking residence in the inner body as a way of life, not as an exercise you do at scheduled times. Have a small percentage of your attention always in the felt sense of the body, even when you are talking to someone or driving or working. That anchor keeps you from being fully swept up in the next thought storm. It is like leaving one hand on the rail while you walk through a crowd. You can still move, you can still talk, you can still think, but you are not going to lose your footing because part of you is in steady contact with something solid. The takeaway is concrete and practical. You have an instrument with you everywhere you go that drops you out of your head and into the present, and most people have never been taught how to use it. The instrument is your own body. The use is to feel it from the inside, not to look at it from the outside. And the practice begins the moment you remember to do it, which can be right now. Chapter 7 gets the most overtly spiritual, but Tolle keeps it grounded. He uses the word unmanifested for the formless source that all life arises from, what other traditions call God, Tao, Brahman, or the source. Most of our experience is the manifested side, shapes, thoughts, objects, events. But there are doorways from the manifested back into the formless, and the chapter lists them. The first is the one Chapter 6 already pointed at, deep felt presence in the inner body. Stay with the life energy in the body long enough, and attention starts to move beyond any particular sensation into the field of awareness itself. The hands stop being a separate object you're aware of and become a wave inside a larger ocean of aliveness. That ocean is what Tolle is pointing at. The second portal is silence. Tolle spends real time on this one because it is so easy to miss. There is the silence between sounds, the silence between two notes of music, the silence between thoughts, the silence in a forest at 3 a.m, the silence in a room at the moment a conversation ends. That silence is the same silence in every place and in every person, and it is always available. Most people treat silence as the absence of something, an empty backdrop waiting for the next noise. Tolle treats it as the presence of something, the formless source itself, audible to anyone willing to listen for it instead of through it. A third portal is deep, dreamless sleep, the slice of every night where there are no dreams and no sense of self. Most people pass through it unconscious and remember nothing, but it is the same formless source they are looking for in meditation, available every night for free. The peace you feel on waking from deep sleep is the residue of having been in it, even though no one was home to record it. Tolle also names conscious dying, which he means both in the literal sense of being present at one's own death and in the daily sense of letting each moment end without clinging to it. And he names surrender, which gets its own full chapter at the end of the book. All of these are doorways from the world of form back into the source the form arose from. He quotes the Zen master Rinzai, who would raise one finger in front of his students and ask what, at this moment, is lacking. The question is designed to short-circuit the seeking mind. The honest answer, in any given moment, is nothing. The body has breath, the room has air, the awareness is here. Everything the mind is reaching for is already present in the gap behind the reaching. The seeking itself is what creates the experience of lack. Tolle is careful not to make the formless sound exotic. He is not asking the reader to believe in anything supernatural. The unmanifested is not a hidden dimension that you have to die or meditate for years to enter. It is the same source the awareness is already arising from in this moment. And the portals are simply the places where the surface of ordinary experience gets thin enough that you can feel what is underneath. He also warns against treating any one portal as the only way in. People who get attached to one technique, one teacher, one tradition often miss the formless when it shows up through a different door. The point is not the door. The point is what is on the other side. And the same thing is on the other side of every door. The takeaway from this chapter is that the formless is not somewhere else, requiring a pilgrimage, requiring a guru, requiring a special state. It is here, in your hands, in the silence between two sounds, in the gap between two thoughts, in the moment between waking and remembering who you are. The work is to notice it again and again until noticing it becomes as natural as noticing your own breath. Chapter 8 is the bluntest in the book and the one most readers underline. Tolle says that most so-called love relationships become love-hate relationships very quickly, capable of flipping from devotion to attack at the flick of a switch. He has seen it in his counseling work for 15 years before writing the book, and he names the pattern directly. The reason, he says, is that most romantic attraction is not love at all. It is ego attachment dressed up as love. Two people meet and each one quietly hands the other the job of completing them, soothing them, fixing the inner emptiness neither has looked at. For a while it seems to work. The infatuation phase produces real chemistry and real connection, and the underlying pain in both people is masked by the high. Each person becomes, for the other, the answer to a question they were too afraid to ask alone. Then the high wears off, as it always does. The partner stops feeding the ego's needs in the exact way it had been fed, and the underlying pain that the relationship was covering surfaces. And when it surfaces, the mind looks around for who to blame, and the nearest target is the person standing there, the partner. So, pain that was personal gets projected outward, and the same person who looked like salvation last month now looks like the cause of all your suffering. That, Tolle says, is the engine of the love-hate cycle, and most couples ride it for years, alternating between the high of reconciliation and the low of the next blow-up. The pain body from Chapter 2 is the main fuel here. Two pain bodies in close quarters recognize each other and feed on each other because they each provide the other with exactly the drama they need. The way through is not to find a better partner, which only restarts the same cycle with new faces. The way through is for at least one person in the relationship to start practicing presence and to stop demanding that the other person make them whole. When one person stops feeding the cycle weakens. They can be fully present with what is, including with the partner's unconsciousness, without reacting from their own. Tolle is careful here. This does not mean staying in a relationship that is actively harmful, and it does not mean swallowing real grievances. He is not preaching martyrdom. He is naming the truth that no relationship can carry the load of completing you, because that load was never the partner's to carry. The relationship becomes enlightened, in his sense, when both people stop looking to each other to fill the inner emptiness and start meeting the emptiness directly themselves. What is left when the projection stops is real love, which is not desperate, not clinging, and not reactive. He also points out that the same dynamic plays out in friendships, in families, in workplace bonds, anywhere two egos rub against each other long enough to start needing things from each other. The romantic relationship is just the place where the pattern is most concentrated and most visible. The takeaway is uncomfortable but freeing. The fights you keep having with your partner are mostly not about your partner. They are about pain you are carrying that the relationship is touching, and the work is yours, not theirs. The moment you take that work back from them and start doing it directly, the relationship changes too, because the dance no longer has the second dancer it was depending on. Chapter 9 reframes the whole emotional life most people are running. Most lives swing between happiness and unhappiness, chasing the highs and running from the lows, both of which depend on circumstances going your way. The job came through, you are happy. The job fell through, you are unhappy. The relationship is good, you are happy. The relationship is rocky, you are unhappy. The weather is nice, the traffic was light, the body feels fine, the bank balance is up, you are happy. The weather turned, the traffic was bad, the body aches, the balance dropped, you are unhappy. It is a full-time game, and most people lose it most days because the conditions are always shifting, and the conditions are never all positive at the same time for long. Tolle says there is a deeper layer underneath both, and he calls it peace. Peace is what is left when you stop running. Happiness depends on conditions being judged as positive. Peace does not depend on anything. It is the quality of the awareness itself, present in every moment regardless of what the moment looks like, available even in the middle of grief, even in the middle of loss, even in the middle of a hard day at work. Happiness goes up and down. Peace is the floor underneath both. This is not a clever rebranding. Tolle is not saying happiness is bad, or that we should stop preferring pleasant experiences to unpleasant ones. He is saying that if your entire sense of well-being is hostage to which side of the swing you are currently on, you will spend your life in a kind of low-grade emergency, always trying to push the swing toward the side you like, and always afraid it is about to swing back. Peace is the recognition that there is something in you that is not swinging. The practice for this chapter takes a strong emotion and uses it as material. The next time you feel anger, sadness, fear, or jealousy clearly enough to name it, do not label it as good or bad, and do not act on it. Just feel it. Notice where it lives in the body, the tightness in the throat, the heat in the chest, the cold in the stomach. Stay with the physical sensation without thinking a single sentence about it. The emotion will start to lose its grip because the witnessing awareness is now stronger than the identification with the feeling. What is left after the storm passes is the peace that was underneath it the whole time. Tolle is careful here. He is not saying you should suppress strong emotion or pretend to be serene when you are not. Suppression is the opposite of what he is asking for. The instruction is to feel the emotion more completely, not less, and at the same time to be the awareness that is feeling it, not the feeling. The two together, full feeling plus full awareness, is what dissolves the identification. You're no longer the angry person. You are the awareness inside which anger is happening. He addresses one more confusion. Some readers worry that if they reach this peace, they will stop caring about anything, that the highs and lows are what make life worth living. Tolle says the opposite is true. When peace is the ground, the highs are still enjoyed, the lows are still felt, but neither one owns you. You become more capable of love, more capable of joy, more capable of meeting hard moments without breaking, because you are not white-knuckling the swing trying to keep it on the side you prefer. The takeaway is that peace is not the absence of trouble. Peace is the ground that holds trouble without being shaken by it, and you are closer to that ground than you think. It is one breath away. It has been waiting. Chapter 10, The Meaning of Surrender. The final chapter pulls the whole book together under one word, surrender. And Tolle spends most of the chapter making sure the word is not misunderstood, because surrender, in his sense, is not what most English speakers hear when they hear the word. Surrender is not resignation. Resignation is the slumped voice that says, I cannot be bothered anymore. Nothing matters. What is the point? Underneath resignation is hidden resentment and exhaustion, and it is not surrender at all. It is masked resistance with the air let out of it. The person who has resigned has not stopped fighting the moment. They have only stopped putting effort into the fight while still holding on to the bitterness of it. True surrender is something else entirely. He gives a small, almost funny example to make the distinction clear. Imagine you are stuck in the mud. Real mud. In real life. Surrender does not mean sitting down in the mud and saying, "Fine, I accept being stuck in the mud. This is now my life." That would be insane, and it would not be surrender. It would be giving up. Surrender means you acknowledge fully and without argument that right now, in this moment, you are stuck in the mud. You stop running the inner sentence, "This should not be happening." From that internal stillness, with a clear head and no resistance, you take whatever action will get you out. You pull, you reach for a branch, you call for help, you wait for the ground to dry. The surrender is internal, the action is external, and the action, coming from a surrendered mind, is almost always more effective than action coming from a panicked one. Tolle defines it cleanly. Surrender is the simple but profound wisdom of yielding to rather than opposing the flow of life. To surrender is to accept the present moment unconditionally and without reservation. That does not mean you cannot change the moment in the next breath. It means you stop fighting the fact that this is the moment you are in right now. And from that acceptance, everything else becomes possible. The catch is that the mind will always tell you the present situation is the wrong one to surrender to. It will say, "Sure, surrender works in general, but not to this. This traffic, this illness, this coworker, this bill, this loss." The mind has an endless list of exceptions, each of which feels uniquely deserving of resistance. Tolle says there are no exceptions. The acceptance is not approval, and it is not preference. It is the simple fact that this moment, the one you are inside of, already is. Fighting the alreadiness of it does not change it. It only adds suffering on top of it. He links surrender back to all the chapters that came before it. Surrender is what dissolves the pain body because it stops feeding it with resistance. Surrender is what ends psychological time because it drops you out of regret and anticipation into what actually is. Surrender is what makes an enlightened relationship possible because it stops the projection of pain onto the partner. Surrender is what opens the portals into the formless because the formless is hidden inside the very moment we are usually too busy fighting to see. Surrender is the inner gesture that lets every other practice in the book work. There is one important note Tolle makes near the end. Surrender is to the inner reality of the present moment, not to the outer situation. You can fully surrender to the fact that you are stuck in a job you hate, and from that surrender, take clear action to find a new one. You can fully surrender to the fact that a relationship has ended, and from that surrender, begin to grieve it cleanly instead of fighting the loss. Surrender is what makes effective outward action possible. It is not a substitute for action. It is the precondition for action that does not come out of panic and reactivity. The takeaway is the takeaway of the whole book. Stop arguing with the moment you are in. Argue with the next one if you need to. But this one, the one you are inside of right now, is the only one that is real, and the inner yes to it is the doorway to everything Tolle has been pointing at for 200 pages. The whole book reduces to a single move you can make right now without changing anything in your life. Notice the voice in your head and notice that you are the one hearing it. That is presence. Everything else in the power of no is variations on that one recognition, applied to time, to pain, to relationships, to silence, to the body, to the daily fight with reality. Most people do not even know they are losing. Tolle is not asking you to become a monk or to leave your job or to believe anything new. He is pointing at a stillness that is already inside you and saying it is the only thing you have ever actually been looking for. The work is small, and it is constant. Catch yourself out of the present, return to it, lose it again, return again. That is the practice, and the practice is the whole thing.